Sam Conn, theathletic.com. I was kind of just looking around a little bit about some of those who we have guests and also just some college football notes. And Sam and David Ubben with a discussion about the Big 12 and a national championship type contender now that Nebraska's been gone forever, Texas and OU on their way out the door. Sam, is it a shot at the conference, or is it that you really can't think of anybody not you, but I can't think of somebody that would say that's who can compete and win a national title, not just be good, but win maybe 3 or 4 consecutive playoff games. What does that say?
Well, I think for one, it's an acknowledgement that this is a conference that is not going to bring in elite talent on a year-to-year basis. And when I say elite talent, I mean top 100 recruits, 5-star recruits at a high volume. And that's what the teams that have won national championships have in common is almost all of them in this modern era have recruited at a top 10, maybe top 15 level with a couple of exceptions. I think Michigan was a little bit of an exception. They really haven't had, I guess, like an elite top 5 class. Clemson has had some top 10 classes, but of course had a generational quarterbacks with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. But the teams in the Big 12 in the new 16-team format are all teams that largely recruit in the 30s and the 40s, the 50s, and even the 60s nationally. So that is just not a talent level commensurate with what we know to win a national championship. Now, does that change now in the portal era because your teams are not all high school recruits? They're recruits plus portal guys. And did TCU maybe show us that formula 2 years ago because they were one of those teams outside of that recruiting stratosphere? Maybe they are a blueprint for what can be done. But yeah, I think it's one, it's that none of those teams recruited at that level. But I think the other thing it tells us is that, and you've mentioned this before, David, from 1 to 16, there's a lot of parity in this league, and there's no real dominant team that you look at and say, oh, that's going to be the big dog in this conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sam, we're probably going to have to see 5-6 years of this league to see who can really separate, which coaches stay. How long is Deion Sanders at Colorado? When he stops having kids that are playing quarterback there, is it different? What changes about the Big 12 all over the place? Who gets hired other places? How much further does the separation get between the Super 2 and them? This is one of the more difficult things to forecast.
Yeah, and that's why when you look at it, when David and I and Mitch Light, our national recruiting editor, we had this discussion on our Until Saturday podcast this week. It was an interesting exercise to try to decipher, and we tried to break the league into tiers. And when we thought about the top tier of teams that we think, okay, if you're picking a team out of the Big 12, the 16-team Big 12 to be a contender, what are you looking for? And me personally, I'm looking for teams that have shown a history of success, more recent history, and that have some really stable coaching situations, because I feel like coaching matters so much in this. And to your point, you mentioned Deion, we don't know how long he's going to be there. You feel like Lance Leipold's going to be in Kansas now for a while. He passed up a lot of jobs and just signed that 7-year deal. Maybe he's there for a while. But when I looked at the top tier, I thought of Utah, because Kyle Whittingham has been there for a long time. And he's won 67% of his games in 21 seasons. I think of Oklahoma State because Mike Gundy is entering his 20th season there and has won 67% of his games. And Oklahoma State has been more weeks in the AP top 25 than any other Big 12 program since 2000 of the new Big 12. I think of Kansas State with Chris Kleiman, and they're coming off a Big 12 championship a couple years ago. They have generated some consistency. And, of course, you have to think about TCU as well, because they played for a national championship recently, although their trajectory is not as consistent. They've got a national championship appearance sandwiched between 2, 5, and 7 seasons. So it makes you wonder a little bit, and you wonder how big a season is this for TCU. But if they are able to bounce back, I think you generally like all the ingredients that exist at TCU, from recruiting footprint, location, coaching staff, all that stuff, that all adds up to something that you would expect would be a winning program.
So of the group of, let's say, of the conferences, Big 10, SEC, ACC, Big 12, even the group of 5, and we include Washington State, Oregon State, of course, as we should, But if, in fact, they were to ever move into that 32 to 50 or 40 game a conference Super 2, as Craig trademarked or should have several weeks ago or months ago, does that eliminate even some that we think would compete for a national title, or would that be about the same teams?
Yeah, if we move into a Super League, for better or worse, I guess it depends on how many teams are involved. Because the one thing I want to know is if we end up in that place, does all the SEC and Big Ten, are they all a part of it? And when I say all of the SEC and Big Ten, I mean, does that mean Vanderbilt's part of it?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean Illinois is part of it? Because if so, why does it make sense for the lower half Big Ten and SEC teams to be in something like that over a team like TCU or a team even like Baylor? The programs that have won conference championships and have achieved something more recently than some of those programs have. That's the question. And I think the Big 12 schools and the conference as a whole obviously is going to try to do everything it can to position itself to be part of whatever future that is. I think it's very clear that these are programs with a lot of administrations that want to be a part of whatever that future is. And that's why you see Texas Tech, for instance, investing a lot in NIL infrastructure. You see Oklahoma State, investing a lot in infrastructure. You see some of these other programs in this conference getting aggressive with those things. I think they want to be a part of that. And the question is who decides who's part of it and what's the cutoff? How many teams? Are we talking 32? Are we talking 48? What is the cutoff and how is it set up and who's running it?
Sam, when you look at the teams with the most potential long-term, if you just took it on the surface, would you start with some of the newer teams like Utah who's made deeper runs, or are there dyed-in-the-wool Big 12 teams that really are sleeping giants?
Yeah, I think Utah, to me, when I look at short-term, I think Utah, because they're a team that has won, 2 Pac-12 championships in 3 years. Again, stable coaching situation. They've shown an ability to recruit and develop and retain. And those are all, I think, really translatable traits to bring over from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. I think, and now you think of Utah as a team that recruits the state of Texas, even when they were in the Pac-12. Well, now they're in a conference with 4 Texas teams. And so now it makes it even easier for them to want to recruit that state and maybe recruit that state even more. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, again, all short term. When I think of long-term potential, I still think, and this is a big year, I still think Baylor is part of that conversation in my mind because 3 conference championships in the last 11 years, played for another one in 2019. Even if the Dave Aranda experiment doesn't end well, I think with the administration that you have from president to AD on down, they have shown a willingness to invest in success. And they've won at a high level with 3 different head coaches in the last dozen years. That to me shows that there's a foundation that can be repeated so that even if it doesn't work on Aranda, maybe the next coach you get in there does. Houston is another team that I think is potentially one of those high ceiling teams because of where they're located, because they're right in one of the most fertile recruiting grounds in the country. And I think we saw what the peak could be in the Tom Herman era when they went 13-1 in 2015. They won the Peach Bowl. Then they went and signed a top 35 class that next year, including Ed Oliver, who was a 5-star. I think that showed you a peak of what the potential could be. And I know some of you guys who know your Southwest Conference history would know they won 4 Southwest Conference titles when they were in it in 20 years. That's not bad at all. So the biggest thing is they haven't been part of that membership for the last 28 years. So does that help them do that? And then the other one is, I think UCF is one of them that I would identify as one with long-term potential just because they're such a big school. They're located in Florida. They have a really good coach who's won at a high level. So those are the ones that I would think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, and there's always that possibility. I brought this up, Sam, and we appreciate you jumping on with us today, is that a once-in-a-lifetime talent that you get at quarterback that you can keep. That's not like he's going to play for you, and let's say you're, I don't know who it is, Iowa State, and then you can keep him. That means that 2 years from then, he's not like playing for Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, or Ohio State. That might also be at least an exception that over 10 years there may be one or two of those guys too.
Yeah, no doubt. Arizona is one of those right now. Like, they kept Noah Fafita. That's huge for them, especially in this conference where, again, there's no dominant power. That gives them a window right now, even with their new coach, Brent Brennan. If they hold on to him at quarterback, when you watch the way he played last year and the potential he has, they're a team that can be in the mix, I think, here in the short term. And I think for that goes for any program that has one of those, like you said, big time program defining quarterbacks. If you can get one of those in this conference, I think it can rocket you up the standings really quickly.
Sam, thank you, buddy. Great stuff, great topic, and one that will be fun to kind of watch to see how things might unfold or will unfold in the coming months and years. Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, with us on 365 Sports. Craig Smoak's back with us when we come back.